emulate. I should be able to say that word. It's not that far from my name, right? Emily, emulate. Anyway.
Today's video is the Poet's Book Tag, and it was created by my friend and my YouTube buddy, Michelle Lizet Flores. She goes by Shellyflowers Reads and Writes on YouTube, and I will link her channel down below. I also believe Kay Spivey did this tag, and I think Tish Garcia did it as well, so I will leave their videos down below. And if you are new to my channel, welcome. My name is Emily Paige Wilson. I am a poet and an aspiring young adult novelist in verse. If you are new to my channel, you don't have to adjust your screen. We're just hanging out in front of my leaning bookshelf. Go ahead and subscribe if you want to see if I ever correct the alignment of this shelf, but spoiler alert,
I probably won't.
I love any excuse to talk about poems and poetry, and I'm really excited to be able to do this tag. So I'm just going to jump right into the first question. The first question is the sonnet, and it is, what is a book of poems that you love? And I actually no longer have a physical copy of this book. I lent it out to a friend. Comment down below if you've ever lent out a book to a friend and then you never got it back and what that book was. It happens. It happens. But a book of poems that I just think is shatteringly beautiful is The Vertical Interrogation of Strangers by Banu Kapil. I have her collection Schizophrene here instead as kind of a placeholder, even though this is a really beautiful collection too. Kapil is one of my favorite poets. I was introduced to her in college by my poetry professor Kazim Ali. I got to see her speak at, I can't remember what AWP, but she was just fantastic. I couldn't even tell you the topic of her speech. I think maybe it was about industry, how we talk about poetry as production and industry, and she's pushing back against this kind of capitalistic framework. And I just remember she brought in this huge bag of charcoal and there was red ribbon streaming everywhere. I wrote a review on one of her books and incorporated some of that experience in, and I'll try to find it. It's quite a long time ago, especially internet time, but I'll leave that down below if I can find it. But what makes The Vertical Interrogation of Strangers such a particularly stunning collection is the list of questions that open the collection. I think this list of questions circulated on Twitter a while back. They're so beautiful. Each one of the questions could be a prompt. I'm gonna read some to you now. I don't know if favorite is the right word, but the question I find the most provocative is, who is responsible for the suffering of your mother? I think that's just an incredibly profound question to contemplate. How have you prepared for your death? What is the shape of your body? How will you begin? And the premise of the collection is that the speaker has asked a set of questions to women of Indian nationality or Indian descent in India, the UK, and the United States. And it's such a multiplicity of voices and experiences. It's so stunning and beautiful and lyrical, but it's also just so evocative and raw, and I think it's stunning. I could not recommend that collection enough. I truly love it. The next question is the golden shovel. So who is a poet you wish you could emulate?
Emulate. I should be able to say that word. It's not that far from my name, right? Emily, emulate. Anyway.
I love Sabrina Ora Mark. I think a lot of people do. Her poetry, her prose. This is Tissim Tissoum. And I'm gonna be honest, when I was first given this book to read in graduate school by my professor, Sarah Messer, I don't think I quite understood it. This follows Walter B and Beatrice and their relationship, and Walter B is he a walrus?
Or a hippo.
Familiar with Mark's work, you know that there's a way in which she plays with syntax and repetition and structure in a way that's so surreal and almost dreamlike. It can be, I don't want to say difficult to follow necessarily, but here's an example. This is the first poem, the first few lines of the first poem. The poem's entitled The Departure. You do not know anymore, sighed Walter B. What is real? Goodbye, said Beatrice. Goodbye, said Walter B. Goodbye, said Beatrice. Goodbye, said Walter B. Where will you go? Asked Beatrice. To the banquet, said Walter B. Beatrice stared at him. So it's a prose poem, And that example of, I wouldn't call it stilted dialogue necessarily, but if you read Wild Milk, her short story collection that came out recently, you'll see some of it in there too. But it's just very dreamlike, very evocative, fantastic, surreal storytelling that you do kind of have to work a little bit for. It's not something for me that is just going to be easily understood the first read through. In fact, I kind of want to read this again now. But the first time I read it, I did not really understand it, and it kind of frustrated me. And then the second time I read it, it clicked, and I thought it was the most beautiful, touching exploration of romantic relationships, but told in that kind of staccato way that I think is really effective.
If you hear me talking to myself, I'm just filming, okay? Oh no.
So the next question is Elegy. What dead poem?
Leave me alone. I thought I meant something else. No, you weren't. Put your headphones in.
The next question is Elegy. Which dead poet would you like to take a workshop with? And for me, the answer is very easy. This would be Mina Loy. She was a contemporary of Eliot and Pound. She didn't get as much recognition, but her work is also, if we want to talk about psychologically digging into romantic relationships through surreal language, she's stunning. The love songs to Johannes especially.
I'm gonna have to edit all your sounds out. No.
Mina Loy, for sure. I think FSG just recently released some of her collected poems. So if you are unfamiliar with her and you want to check her out, I would start with that resource. The next question is Acrostic. What is a work of art that isn't a poem but feels like a poem? And do not laugh at me.
Do not laugh at me. But
the particular series of paintings that I'm thinking about are Joseph Alber's Homage to the Squares. I love this line of work. Spiritually, it settles me, it calms me. I remember in high school, my creative writing class took a field trip to the North Carolina Museum of Art. I can't remember the specific name of the museum. And we were supposed to write an acrostic poem to a piece of art. And I remember we got back to the classroom and somebody said,
"See those paintings with the squares? Imagine being that kid who liked those."
But I'm telling you, there's something about the composition of these paintings and the color story and how precise it is. It just feels like looking at a well-written sonnet, or there's just such attention to form that to me the whole series is just so, there's something that's just so spiritual and simplistic about it, and for me those paintings are poems. So the next question is the Ghazal. What is a book of poems you can read over and over and over again? And a collection that I keep coming back to is Thomas and Beulah. That's another word I can't say, just like emulate. Maybe it's the UL sound. Thomas and Beulah is a collection that I keep coming back to. Rita Dove won the Pulitzer for it. I just think, again, thinking about interpersonal relationships and romantic relationships and how they age and how we explore those through vignettes and characterizations. I think that Dove's work in this collection is so stunning. It's a literary novel in verse in a certain extent. And because my first collection of poems, my first full-length collection of poems, Yalubi, is inspired by my Czech heritage, I really leaned heavily on this collection when I was writing that. And when I finally do get to reveal the cover of that collection, you'll see I'm paying some homage to this collection. The next question is prose, and it's what fiction or nonfiction writer do you feel writes like a poet? And I will say, one of my pet peeves, y'all, one of my pet peeves is when somebody says, oh, this book is really poetic, just because I have such a high standard of what poetic writing really means. I'm kind of annoying in that way. I realize that comes across as being like so persnickety, and I don't want to be persnickety.
Even though I'm a Capricorn, so it's like kind of in our stars.
But I have a high standard for describing prose as being poetic. So the next few books that I'm going to recommend then, come with a high seal of approval. The book that I'm actually reading now is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I had not read her first book, but I just heard so many wonderful things about this collection. It is stunning. The language in this book is just so well crafted, and I'm going to read you just the first sentence of the epilogue. Red over green, raspberries bead the thicket on a summer afternoon. I love that. I mean, just that image that we start off with these colors, and they're very strong colors, right? They're contrasting, they're red and green, red over green, and not and, right? Red over green, raspberries bead on the thicket, or excuse me, raspberries bead the thicket on a summer afternoon. So there's a lot of spondies in that sentence too, so clearly she's thinking about meter. We also have the alliteration with the R's, the red and the raspberries. We have the assonance with the green and the bead. The sentences are so beautiful, in addition to the fact that she's writing about indigenous wisdom and how the Western world really needs to draw on that more so we can be stewards of the land. It's really beautiful, and I like the sentences in here so much that they've actually given me an idea for a new series on this channel. Okay, plot twist. So we have relocated to another bookshelf, which does not lean. My boyfriend came home from work, so I do not want to be filming upstairs while he's trying to go to sleep because he works the night shifts. But just in terms of poetic prose, I really wanted to also mention The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. I think that this book is, again, spectacular but heartbreaking at the same time. I'm really into that, I guess. And also Strange the Dreamer by Lonnie Taylor. I know that Kate Kavanaugh just did a video on this, and then Kate Spivey kind of did a response video. For the record, I am team prologue. I loved the prologue. It did not feel like a red herring to me. I knew who the prologue was about from the beginning, and it just made it all the more painful when the event happened. And then the twist at the end was even more powerful. So, I mean, stunning. It's stunning, and it's like makes me mad that I don't write like this. Like, I have not yet hit this level of craft. So beautiful. I remember just like having to read this out loud. It's just so good. Her skin was blue, her blood was red. She broke over an iron gate, crimping it on impact. And there she hung, impossibly arched, graceful as a temple dancer swooning on a lover's arm. It's stunning. It's like, how do you build this fantastical world and have these characters and have the plot be engaging, and then also have your prose consistently on this level? Gold Famed Citrus by Claire Vaye Watkins is also phenomenal in many of the same ways I just described Strange the Dreamer. And then that makes me think of Karen Russell's Swamplandia. Karen Russell was maybe like the first prose writer where I was just like,
damn girl, you a poet.
The next question is spoken word. Which poet's work do you love to hear out loud? And I was thinking about some of the performance poets who I've seen who were just really engaging. And Lauren Zuniga is one, Anish Mojgajni is one, Buddy Wakefield is one. Let me tell you, when you're in a little college cafe and Buddy Wakefield is dropping the line, forgiveness is the release of all hope for a better past, it hits different, y'all. It hits different. So the next question is, what is your favorite novel in verse? And there are so many good novels in verse in the YA world. I think Elizabeth Acevedo really, to me, she's one of the first people that I think of when I think about novels in verse. But I think that there's a lot of conversation around YA novels in verse on the YouTube space. So if anybody's not familiar, I wanted to mention Anne Carson's The Autobiography of Red. Again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record. It's the exploration of Geryon, who's our protagonist, and he falls in love with Heracles, and Heracles is kind of a piece of shit.
But you know, haven't we all been there?
And it is just so stunning. Again, just the lyricism, like this is actually on my reread list to get to pretty quickly, but just the way that conversations happen, and emotional growth and emotional stagnation, and this empathetic, compelling character that you fall in love with through a difficult childhood and then not accepting himself and then having this really tumultuous relationship, and you just want to say, get out of it. It's so painfully beautiful, and I think it's just so stunning, and it's probably my favorite novel in verse. And the last question is acrostic, which is spell out a word using the titles of books. And so what I did with my bookshelf upstairs is I literally just started scanning from left to right different titles until I made a word. And the first word that I found was lit. I don't know. L-I-T. Lit. So this book, ignore my bookmark. This is Lucky Coat Anywhere by Michael Burkard. I love Michael Burkard. Again, I think this was a poet that was introduced to me through my college professor, Kazim Ali, because of Kazim's work with Nightboat Books. Y'all know Nightboat Books. I just stand that press. I think that they're doing the most amazing work. Every line in this book is beautiful. Like, even just now, it's like, you want to be a shore to a wounded boy. Someone in the alphabet is always dying. Oh, and this is my favorite one. I always thought that there's tattoo potential in this, because the moon is not the ragged experience the tree branches suggest. I just love Michael Burkard so much. And this is the L from Lucky Coat Anywhere. The next one is the I from Insert Boy by Denez Smith. I'm sure this is a really popular, I know this is a really popular collection. When this book came out, I was so excited about it that I purchased a second copy to give to my boyfriend, because I was like, I don't want anyone taking mine. And normally I would not buy two books, I would just share them. But I was like, no, this one is mine. The form in it is so varied, but so, like, you can really tell that Smith knew what each poem needed in terms of the form. It's a really beautiful exploration of identity, very teachable. Like, what I think is so awesome is that each one of these poems could easily be a lesson plan if you were teaching poetry in the classroom or in a community workshop or on YouTube. And then the T, the final letter of lit, is for There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce by Morgan Parker, and that gets you lit. So thank you for hanging out with me. I hope you guys saw some titles maybe that you're interested in, that you would want to go check out. Please do let me know if anybody else has done this tag. I would love to be able to check it out. If you've shot it, I would love to be able to check it out, but also I would just love for you to answer any of the questions in the comments below. Again, Shellyflowers Reads and Writes is the person who created this tag. So thank you, Shelly. I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll check in with you later. Bye.